Welcome to Draw Process. I'm Ike, and this is where I draw pages of my comic and process about the techniques I'm using and my development as an artist. Today I'm on page 52 of episode 2 of my comic, First Sun and Sword, and you can read the whole thing on ikecomics.com. So here we go. So, I'm marking out the page where the panel borders would be. Where the gutters would fall around the safe area for printing, which will be at a regular comic book size, and I work at 11 by 17. It's very common for comic creators to do that. But I'm not going to actually go with panels. You'll see as I'm penciling this out. So what I'm doing here is I loosely drew the head of the villain, Pompidou, and a word balloon next to his head. And then I was making a panel next to him where we see Farah and Sun with the cart. And then I'm just kind of working down to another row of panels where I could show Farah, I could show Pompidou, again speaking, and then Sun's reaction. And you'll notice that I already moved the head over. I'm already breaking what would have been some panel borders. So I decided to turn this entire page into a collage with no panel borders. Basically, I cheated a little bit and put a little bit of panel borders in what you might call the third row or tier. So Pompidou's head, the villain, he's talking, word balloon's next to him, then you get a shot. You know, the word balloons kind of function and the buildings in the background function as sort of a divider between him on the left and then Sun and Farah on the right. And then his head about the same size, the word balloons continuing to cascade down and slightly to the right as his head repeats there. And here I've used Farah's hat as the divider between the first tier and this second row of panels. And so we see her, and then we see an over-the-shoulder shot of Sun over her shoulder so that I can use her hat on either side of Pompidou there. At this point, there is no element that I'm using that will create a division between the row above and this row. So I went ahead and used just a horizontal line as the barrier. And that's where I'm saying I'm kind of cheating and using a panel border. And I'm letting Farah and Sun with the cart here, I'm letting the cart push into the next space with somewhat of a gutter, a gap between that image and this one to function like a panel gutter. And so Pompidou's issued his warning and his instructions. They pause. Farah is speaking quietly, imperceptibly, to Sword, who is in the cart under the straw. And then her and Sun look at each other. And then we see the imposing, this shot is between the legs of Pompidou, using them as framing elements. And then the perspective of the background and everything will pull right towards them looking rather small at this angle, him very imposing. And it's a nice end point to the collage. So the last image in the collage is not simply someone's face in the bottom right corner, but it's a nice grounded image. It's symmetrical. It covers the full width. It's literally the ground. And that grounds the entire composition. At least that's what I was thinking. I was hoping and what I sort of felt my way into as I scribbled this out. But it didn't take me too long, maybe 2.5 hours to do the whole page. So it flowed rather smoothly. Sometimes it's not as smooth. It was helpful that there was not a lot of figures to draw in the background. There was not a whole lot of background because it is such a collage. And again, that box I drew that shows me where the panel borders would be if everything was within a panel and not full bleed to the edge of the paper is there simply as a guide to make sure that my word balloons and the most important information fall within that. It just sort of helps me balance things. You'll see here my left hand is touching the paper, and I'm just kind of pointing out to myself right about there is where the vanishing point is. So that as I'm drawing with my right hand, drawing the lines on this building coming from the vanishing point, I'm just kind of faking it. I'm not using a solid point or a straight edge to lay those out. And the cart is going, it's sort of sitting awkwardly on the stairs. So it's not level. So you'll notice that when I first started to draw it, I had it going towards the vanishing point, but then I realized, well, it's going to go to a point lower than the vanishing point because it's tilted upward. And at this angle, my figure's in perspective. You're going to see under her hat, you're going to see under their chins, that kind of thing. I had to be careful with that angle because Sun being shorter, I don't want him to disappear behind the cart. And that continually came up in this scene where I'm making sure you can see him. I'm referencing off camera here. I will be referencing Pompidou and Farah, just seeing how I've drawn them in the prior pages of this comic to try to capture their essence and how I make them look here. And it's never quite the same. Pompidou looks a little different here because my inking style has changed since when I first did the pages he was on. But the way he's changed, it brings him more alive. There's more aliveness, cartooning, expressive elements, and more detail in the way I'm doing it now. So I embrace bringing things more to life, even if it's a little change on the design. And of course, now I think, oh, this has become, what I'm going to reference as his primary design, his primary look. This collage, again, the word balloons cascade down. They not only function as dividing elements, but they help make sure that you move and you flow through the page. So if someone were to start at the top left, see Pompidou's face, look at his word balloon, and they just followed that balloon down to the next balloon and the next one, it would come right down to his other head, on the second row. If someone did not bother to look on either side of those balloons and see Sun and Farah, that would be okay. If their eye flowed and just kind of skipped over it, that's okay, because there's not important information there, you could say. Like seeing her face, her expression, them standing there, it's not necessary. So those less necessary elements just float around the core. And I start with 4H pencil, and now it looks like I'm still using 4H, because I just saw it on the side of the pencil there in the video. I assumed I would have switched to H or 2H by now, as I'm, but those are pretty loose, so I guess I'm going to add a little more detail. Somewhat writing the story as I go. I knew they were going to get in this situation. I have a general idea of what's happening, but precisely how they get into it and get out of it, and particularly what actions occur and words are said, are not fully done. I heard about in the Bone comic, Jeff Smith kind of drawing the comic smaller with all the word balloons, and that's literally how he's writing the stories. He's writing it in a loose comic and then finishing it, and I relate to that a lot. It feels better to me to write it in picture form, storyboard, rough form, whatever you want to call it. For me, though, I've been doing that when I draw the page. I'm trusting myself with quite a bit there, that I have to draw it as I have to write it as I draw it, with more of a general idea of where I'm going. It means I can't, it means I can't go back and edit some things. Like, I'm going to corner myself a bit with this approach. But it is working, obviously. I'm able to complete pages and tell a story. And it's similar in spirit. The design here, these silly, shoes, flamboyant kind of shoes that curl up at the ends, just definitely playing with him and his gang. The camera angle also helped me not. It's positioned in such a way that I don't really have to draw all the men with crossbows behind her. So that's intentional. So it's not only that I want to save time, I don't want to draw all these people with crossbows behind her, but if you see little hints of them back there, with, especially depending on your art style, but it becomes, it definitely confuses the composition. It kind of, it makes it more complex. It makes it harder to follow. I want you to see the outline of her, son, and the cart here. And if there's little pieces of men hanging on each side with crossbows, like, are you even able to tell what those things are? Those little pieces. So I have to show enough of them and draw them enough that you can tell what they are, and then they're also breaking that silhouette. Not sure that is gonna help at all. So it isn't simply to make it more efficient for me. And there's a hint of the men behind them in a panel prior. Using a micron pen for the outline of word balloons, I do the lettering digitally, and then I come in with a G pen, nib, and black ink to ink the image. And that's what you'll see me doing here. A little over 5 times speed. It is almost Christmas and the holiday season, New Year's, and seems fitting that I was thinking just before recording this that I might talk a bit about thankfulness and kind of surrounding yourself with beautiful things. I don't have a huge collection of comics, but I do have books, and by comics I mean graphic novels more than I even mean single issues. But I do have books from young adult graphic novels or all ages graphic novels, manga, and American graphic novels, as well as serialized comic books that are collected into trade books, trade paperbacks. So, but I have these books with just each of them something that I just really appreciate or that I find really nice about it. Having those little inspiring things in my visual space just keeps me remembering the beauty, right? So I talk on here about my discipline, my hard work ethic, and so on. And that's one way of looking at it. But it's different if you say, I'm going to stay connected to the beauty, the joy of it, the things that I love. I'm going to remind myself and stay in a headspace that is appreciating, that is, I guess keeps the hope alive, And more and more when I look at my art, I guess I could say I like it, but I'm not sure what category I fit into, what box I fit into. Less and less do I see how I match American comics, for example. What's standard these days? And so I'm not looking at books to compare myself to them. It's simply to appreciate. And I think there was a time when there was more comparison. It was more competitive. It was more, okay, how are they doing it versus how I'm doing it? Is there something I can learn, or, how do I measure up, and so on? And that has really gone away at this point. I don't know if it's getting older, and having another career that I'm quite focused on, or just being 10 years in on making comics. But I've gotten to the point where, I'm not looking at it that way. I can just look at it like a child, just happy to see it. And that is a different kind of fuel than the competitive fuel. This fuel is light. It feels more joyful and appreciative, and I think it affects the work when I bring that to my own comic. It doesn't feel as heavy. It doesn't feel as serious. I can play on the page too. I can be in that space, that headspace. So I like that. I like surrounding myself with those things, and they can be some weird books that I enjoy. They may not. There's so many different reasons I might enjoy something, and it can be the art and books of people that I'm friends with, or people in the Clever Kaiju community, like Eric E. Danger Wright, with his Truck Stop Hipsters indie comic, which is now on Clever Kaiju. We're helping distribute that and sell that, so that's available now. But a fully watercolored, very unique vision of for his book. What a cool thing to exist. What a nice little, I don't know, beautiful, sweet, thing, like nice flowers on the path in life that lift you up. I have been moving away from using brush pen as much to fill in black areas. I'm going with much more of a hatching style, which is more of an organic or loose hatching, and not perfectly, not long lines, not parallel as much. For example, on the cart, the lines are definitely not parallel, but they're mimicking wood grain in a way. And even though it's in shadow, there's highlights in it. There's areas of white that have that loose organic style. And one thing about using a nib, a pen, is the lines tend to be more rigid, angled, than using a brush. And yet, the way I'm using a brush is giving things a looseness and an organicness just by being rougher and sketchier. It does help them have a looseness and an organicness. Just like that line in the background I just laid down, it is so wobbly because the way I'm holding the pen is not tight in that regard, in that moment. And so the result, I feel, has some of the flowiness that you would see in brush work with me without having to use a brush. And the reason I'm not using a brush is because this is what I'm fiddling with lately. Is using the nib. Before that, it was microns, mostly with only using a brush to fill in black areas, and it was heavy blacks with heavy, blacks and then heavy whites with no hatching. And now I'm going in and I'm adding more texture and details, and that's what I'm into right now. But someday I may go back to using a brush, which I've done some things in brush before. So I might go to more of a brush approach, which would change things. Before I would use the heavy blacks and a lot less lines, and it was easier to be able to tell what should be brought forward with what you would add detail to, and what would sort of disappear into the blurriness, the out of focus, the background. And here on Pompadour's head, you'll see that his ears are just left open. There's the detail is not added into the ear, and it's not clearly separated from his skull. And again, you're not drawing what is actually there. You're drawing to convey what would be there, to communicate. It's not meant to be reality. It's meant to be communication. And so by me leaving that open, there's plenty of detail on the front features of his face. There's the edge of the light and shadow along the sides of his face, around the cheekbones and the temple. But as it goes back to the ear, the detail fades away. It's either blown out by light or it's in shadow. It's not in focus, this kind of thing. But by moving to adding so many lines on the page and doing it with hatching, with texture, it is tempting to just add all the details, to not do what I just did there, where I leave things open. Because I'm already moving so much and putting so many lines in, and I'm kind of building and constructing it on the page without the pencils really being fully finished. So it would be tempting to just fully define everything, which I'm working on not doing. I'm trying to get good at that and to continue to do that, to leave things open. And I think that will be a future for me, because as I draw lots of figures, lots of backgrounds, and everything, if I can draw more detail in the important areas I want you to pay attention to, and then let them kind of fade out of focus in other areas, even more than I already do, then I'm going to communicate more succinctly and efficiently, and it'll read, maybe more impactfully because it's more clear, it's more dynamic or decisive. There's lots of reasons that I want to do that. And you'll see like examples of that where there's these scribble lines to indicate the straw cloak, cape that she's wearing, bodysuit, whatever, that she's covered herself in to kind of hide her identity. And there's some lines on it that indicate the straw, but it's open in different spots. It's open along the front, because if I continued those lines, well, then those lines would start to compete with or not allow for much separation between that and the straw that is in the cart. The straw in the cart are lines of a different nature. They look a little different, obviously, so they convey a different meaning, but leaving that open negative space above it, between her and it, separates them nicely. So that's an example of leaving things open. Yeah. I'm gonna keep beautiful things around me, and keep that in mind. That gives me hope, gives me the lightness of heart and spirit to keep going when things seem too hard or pointless, or whatever. I can that won't be the dominant feeling I have. And yeah, it's fun to see how other people communicate, convey things with their line work or whatever it is. It has been 2 years that I've been doing this series, and I think that it's going to have to change eventually. So the first issue I did a monochromatic colors, the first volume, and it was 70 something pages. This one is going to be 80 something, and it has a much more full palette with added, lighting and shadow layers. So it's more effort into the colors. But as my inks are getting more detailed and complex, whatever you want to call it, I feel like it works in black and white ever better, always better and better in black and white than it used to be. So I'm considering going black and white in the next issue. I would like to be able to draw pages quicker, get the story out quicker. I can always add color later, but as long as it's clear enough, as long as it looks good enough in black and white, then let's give it a shot. So that's what I'm thinking for now. Also, with the video series, it has been great cataloging every page of this comic through 2 entire volumes, and it's been over 2 years of doing that. But I think that I'm going to switch to maybe doing one of these a month, and maybe I can also do other kinds of videos to mix it up for my own sake too. Because I think even if you only saw 1 out of 4 of the pages I do, or 1 out of 6, whatever it ends up being, it would still catalog the progression of my style and skill and so on. It would still catalog the developing of the comic without having to be every single page. And that will save me several hours per week of editing video. And it's enough time potentially. I'm not sure how much time I spend doing this, but it might be enough time to do another comic page instead. Or a different video, like I said. So that change might be coming, but I'm going to wait, obviously, until I finish this volume, which will take about half of 2025. Talk about commitment. This project and this video series and the comic both have been major commitments, more than I've committed to ever before when it comes to my comics, and with long-term planning, long-term commitment. So I can't stop. I just got to keep doing it and keep going and keep going. And then even if I get the feeling, well, maybe this isn't the best thing to use my time for, well, I'm going to keep doing it anyways. There's something about that. We can make commitments and need to change gears. And I'm glad I didn't do this like right when I first started comics, because I didn't know myself well enough to know if I could really commit to this and if it's what was best for me. Because obviously if you learn that it's not best for you, then you'd be better off changing it sooner than later. But I think it was at the right time where I could commit to it. I think it's mostly a positive that I've let myself be contained, limited, disciplined, with this one thing. And I think the artwork shows that, and the storytelling, the quality of the storytelling and compositions, and my mastery of using perspective and things. There's a lot of progress shown here, and in the past, not as much. It was too sporadic. Like I've said before, I would spend many months perhaps thinking of stories, doing other things, and then I would get around to drawing the comic, and I would do it in 1 month, and then maybe do 2 that year, and that's it. So out of 12 months, I spent 2 months drawing comics, and only a handful of days doing the layouts and stuff. That's not enough practice. And now I'm doing it every single week, and there's no breaks in it. So that is discipline. That's continued improvement. And this is the finished page. If you don't have time to read all of these word balloons, you can obviously go to ikecomics.com, read the comic in its entirety. Take your time. You'll see that the colors are kind of helpful in the flow down this page, with his red bow and his blue-green jacket. The bit of red cloth she uses to hold her hat on it helps her pop there, draw attention there. Thank you for watching. Happy holidays to everyone. And I hope to take a few days off next week and really do nothing Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, other than some family stuff, obviously, and a little meal prep and so on. But really try to relax and enjoy it, and I hope you do the same. And I'm sure I'll have a little time to draw a page as well, and keep my practice going. And good luck to you doing the same. And next Sunday will be the last video of the year, so that's cool. I'll see you then.